You're gonna go down there.
Go on.
Let's go. I'll get there.
Yeah, Charles.
Holy crap! Look at them all.
G'day and welcome to my channel. As a fish hobbyist, at one stage or another, we will all go and try and catch our own fish. The important thing is there's a right way and a wrong way of going about it. In this video I've got together with a long-time fish keeper, Leo O'Reilly, and we have both gone out on fish collecting trips together and have both collected and kept fish for many years. In this video I've filmed Leo giving an in-depth talk on how to collect, prepare, bag and transport your fish the right way home and to get them into your aquarium safely. But it's also important to first study the laws and regulations in your state or territory. So before you go collecting, check out the regulations for your state and if need be, join your local fish club. There is an Australian and New Guinea Fish Association in every state and territory of Australia, so look them up. They do some great field trips and the members have a lot of knowledge. And just remember, if you're collecting, to do it responsibly. As a creator of these videos, I think it's my responsibility to show you the right way about doing things for the fish and the environment. And please do not overfish. You only need to take a few home with you as brood stock, and always be on the lookout for signage, as it's illegal to fish in national park and reserves. This is episode 1 of an in-depth video on how to collect. So sit down and enjoy the video.
G'day. Jason and I have been a bit disillusioned lately when we've read a number of posts on Facebook about people that have gone and caught fish and then complained that they couldn't get any of them home alive. And it's not hard to keep fish alive if you take a little bit of care of them, but it's very disillusioning to hear that so many fish are dying needlessly because people are lacking a little bit of knowledge. So hopefully this video will help you understand that. Two main ways that we use to catch the fish. One is with the bait traps. These you can get from Kmart or BCF or any number of shops. A couple of different colours that you can get. I find the brown ones and the green ones, I prefer to use the brown ones and the green ones. You can also get them in blues, reds, whatever. You might be able to dye them, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure how much difference the colour makes. You'll notice that these traps have a larger opening from which you can remove the fish. They've also got a smaller bait pouch in here. There's a number of things you can use for bait. Jason prefers to use cat food. I use some burley pellets that I used to use for fishing. Bread and Vegemite's a popular one as well. But the really important thing is to make sure that your bait goes into that bait pouch, because you don't want your fish to be eating the bait. If the fish eat the bait, then they've got something in their guts. If they've got something in their guts, they're going to poop, and if you've got poop in your bags, it'll pollute the water and the fish will die. Well, sorry, could die if they pollute the water enough. So make sure that the fish cannot eat the bait, which means if you're using bread and Vegemite, don't just open this big pouch and drop your bread and Vegemite into the main body of the trap, because the other problem then is when you tip the trap up to tip the fish out, all the bread and Vegemite then pollutes the water and you can't see what the fish are that you're catching. Now the first thing that I'd recommend when you go to a fishing spot is don't just charge into the water. Take a bit of time to have a look around. I will generally try and find places that look best for the traps, places that look best for the dip net. And for dip nets you can use any number of or types of nets. The big thing is to make sure it's got a nice fine weave. The finer the weave, the less chance you'll have of small fish gilling themselves. Gilling is when they get caught in the holes and you can't get them out without killing them. So normally we'll use a net or bait traps to catch them. So firstly, work out where you're going to put your nets, where you're going to put your bait traps. Collect some fresh water. If you're going to wade around in a small muddy pool and you dirty the water, then it's no good trying to collect fresh water after you've done your wading. So generally I'll collect 2 buckets of fresh water before I even go into the water myself, so that the fish aren't in muddy water. Right, so with collecting your water, just be very careful where you collect the water from. particularly if you're in a still body of water. Around the edges in the shallow, it's going to be very, very hot. It can be 5-10 degrees cooler out in the middle down deep. So if you're catching your fish out in the deep in the middle and you're collecting the water from the edge where it's 30 degrees, you put your fish into that 30-degree water and they're going to go belly up very, very quickly. Within seconds they will die. So you need to try and make sure that you understand the temperature that the fish are in, that you're catching them, and collect that same sort of temperature of water when you're collecting your water. Okay, so once I have my bucket of water, the first thing I'm going to do is put it into a sorting tank, because you might catch 20, 30, 50 fish. You don't want to take that many fish home. Jason will talk to you later about the regulations about how many fish you can catch and how you need to mark your traps and so on. But the fact is you'll probably catch far more fish than you ever need to take home. So generally, if I'm after some brood stock, I'll be looking for maybe 3 males, 5 females, or 4 males and 6 females. Generally, I try and have more females than males so that the males don't overwork the females. But I can't do that unless I've got a sorting tank, and I can't sort things in a bucket because I can't see them clearly. So basically, once you've got the clean water, put some into the sorting tank, and depending on the sort of fish that you've caught, you may need to put a lid on it. Now, these plastic tanks are really convenient. You used to be able to pick them up from Kmart and all sorts of places for about $12. They got very hard to find for a number of years, but I think they've started reappearing in Bunnings, but they're not $12 anymore. They're about twice that price. But they're really convenient because they don't break like glass does. They come with this convenient cover. The cover itself has a liftable flap so you can open it when you need to, because if you catch rads and blue eyes, they're not going to jump. You catch double-ai, I guarantee, if you fill this up halfway, within 30 seconds every double-ai in there is going to jump out and be on the ground. Hence you need the lid. So you've collected the fresh water, you've got your sorting tank filled, then you need to make sure you've got something to keep them in to take them home. There are a number of different ways to do it. I prefer plastic bags for a number of reasons. One, they're easy to handle. I'm only taking small quantities of fish, and I may fish 3 or 4 different locations at a time. So I can keep 3 or 4 different bags of fish in the one esky, and I don't need lots of space to keep them. Other people prefer buckets. I understand why they do that. Jason will have someone explain that for you. I don't, mainly because A, the size of the bucket for the number of fish that I'm keeping, and B, the space considerations. So generally I prefer plastic bags. These ones are double bagged because I got some really thin bags that tend to leak a bit, so I double bag them so that they don't leak in the esky that I put them into. However, if you get normal bags, you shouldn't have to do that. What I then do is add some salt. This is cooking salt. You can also use pool salt. It's been recommended to me that you don't use iodized table salt because of the chemicals, the iodization process. So this is just ordinary cooking salt, non-iodized. Generally for a bag of fish, you're probably looking at 5 grams of salt per litre, or about a teaspoon of salt per litre for most fishing situations. The salt has 2 major purposes. One, it's a natural antibiotic, so it will tend to stop them fungusing up, as they sometimes do. Secondly, it also helps prevent osmotic shock. Osmotic shock is the fish's ability to control the salt levels in its body. So for freshwater fish, we add a bit of salt, which helps them to maintain the salt levels in their body. So for a standard plastic bag, normally you can get about 1.5 litres to 2 litres of water into a bag. So basically I just add a 5 ml or 5 gram teaspoon of cooking salt to the plastic bag. I also like to add something like stress coat. There are a number of different products you can use. This says you need about 5 mils per 38 litres. There's going to be about 1.5 litres to 2 litres in there, so you really only need a couple of drops. So just a couple of drops in there. And then you add the water to the bag. Shake it up to make sure that's all mixed in. Now the amount of water that you add to the bag depends on how much turbulence is going to be in that bag when you're travelling. So if you go to an aquarium shop, you'll probably find you've got about 25 to 30% water and the rest is air. That's fine if you're putting it in the back of your car travelling on a sealed road to go home. Some of the places I fish, the roads are very, very rough, and generally my rule is the rougher the road, the more water and the less air I have in a bag. So if I'm travelling on a sealed road, that's plenty of water. If I'm travelling on a rough road, there'll be that much air and that much water. A little bit of agitation is okay because it'll help the air, oxygen or air get into the water, but what you don't want is them sloshing around. It'll kill a fish very, very quickly if you do that. So generally the rougher the road, the more water and the less air. The smoother the road, the less water you actually need to keep them alive. Now, I believe oxygen in air is highly overrated. I know that may sound funny, but a fish will survive for at least 24 hours with a tiny bit of air in the bag like that. They don't consume a lot of air or a lot of oxygen. If you want to use oxygen, if you want to have lots of air in your bag, I don't mind at all, but you don't actually need it for short trips. In terms of keeping fish in the plastic bags, the most important time, I've travelled for 2 weeks at a time catching fish up in northern Queensland, kept fish alive and got them home alive after that 2-week period. Same with the Northern Territory, travelling for a couple of weeks and keeping fish alive during that time. The main consideration is the first 3 days, because the first 3 days they'll be purging whatever's in their stomachs. So for the first 3 days you're probably going to have to siphon out whatever they've purged, any poop that's in the bag, and do water changes. After those 3 days, after they're not pooping, after they're not purging themselves, then the water changes become less critical and maintaining the temperature is the critical point. So we've collected fresh water of the correct temperature out of the creek or pool. We've got that same water in our bag with some salt and some stress coat in it. Once we've caught our fish, we upend the trap, empty them into our sorting tank, put on the lid. So once you've got the fish in, make sure you get the lid on very quickly so that the jumpers don't jump out, and then you can open the little flap to access the lid. So I pick out the 3 males and 4 females that I need, put them into my bag, and the rest of the fish, this water's not medicated, this is just straight water out of the creek, so you can then take those fish that you don't want, and you'll probably end up with a whole lot of other fish as well. You could end up with blue eyes, dubulei, rads, gudgeons, gobies, glassfish, hardy heads, and you don't necessarily want all those fish. So what I would normally do is keep a bucket at the side. If I'm trying to sort fish, that things that I don't want that accidentally get into my net, I just put them in a bucket and I'll throw them back into the creek. And once you've finished selecting the fish you want, then you empty these fish back into the creek as well. Again, don't empty them onto the side where the water's hot, empty them back into the middle where you got them from and the water's nice and cool. Another thing I sometimes take with me is a photo tank. This is a very small tank. And it's very narrow, and the idea is it stops the fish from turning end on and facing you so that you can't take a photo of them, which they typically do if you have them in a big tank like this. So these photo tanks are really convenient, and I have a small lid that goes over this as well. Not easy to get, but you can get them made up if you know someone that makes tanks. I'm a member of ANGFA, the Australian New Guinea Fishers Association. If you join ANGFA, you can take part in meetings, field trips and so on, and we also sell things like those aquariums at our club shop. Right, so once you've caught your fish and you've got them in the bag, it's time to bag them up. So what I'll do is I generally squeeze out about 1/3 of the air, and then I do what I call a labyrinth fold. The idea of a labyrinth fold is you prevent the air from escaping. So I just fold the top over 3 or 4 times very thinly, and then I roll the sides in like so, and then holding that, spin the bag till I find where it puffs out with air. Some rubber bands, I just get these from you can get them from Office Works or from local newsagents. Generally, I'll use 2 rubber bands. If you have 1 and it breaks, you're going to lose fish. If you have 2, at least you've got some insurance. So the way I do that is I secure this end of the rubber band with my finger. I'm holding the other end with this finger. I'll then reach through, grab that end that I have secured, and that rubber band is now anchored on the bag. I can then wind this one around, working my way down, squeezing that air tighter and tighter until I've got a small amount of rubber band left. I then gooseneck that bag and loop the end around it. So there you have a bag full of fish. Gooseneck tied, that air won't escape, the water won't escape. Even if you tip it upside down, there's no water going to come out of that. So now you have your happy, healthy fish bagged up. The next important thing is temperature control. If I'd now left this on the table here for an hour, this water would heat up and again the fish would not be in a very good condition. So generally, I'll take something like this. This is a seafood box, so made of styrofoam. And as soon as I've bagged up these fish, if I'm fishing multiple locations, I'll write on the bag where the location is I've caught the fish from. Place it in the styrofoam box. That then goes under a tree in the shade or into the car if there's no sun and the car's not going to heat up. If it's in the car and I'm traveling, I'll also put a towel over the top of that as well. The other thing I generally do when I first get to a place is test the water. The 2 big things I'm looking for are the pH and the hardness. More the pH than the hardness, but I'm also interested in whether it's hard or soft water. But the bigger the pH variation, then the longer it's going to take you to acclimatise those fish, because if you take them from a pH of 4 and put them into a pH of 7 without that acclimatisation, then they're going to suffer from pH shock, which again can kill them. So generally you can buy little aquarium test strips. It'll also tell you how much ammonia and nitrate you have in your water. I'm not really concerned about that when I'm out fishing. Or you can buy dedicated water test kits. Unfortunately, the strips only go down to about pH of about 6. So if you're fishing in acidic water that goes below 6, you'll probably need a dedicated low pH test kit to be able to get the correct pH of that water. Once I get those fish home, I then need to acclimatise them to my tank conditions. So what I'll do, firstly, I'll open the bag. In this case where I've used 2 bags, I'll remove the outer bag. I then fold down the corners of the bag. You don't have to, you can just hang it over the side of your tank if you need to. I fold down the corners of the bag so it creates like a little air pocket around the top. And then I just float that in my tank. Now, depending on how big the difference in conditions are, normally I'll float it for half an hour. That's to adjust the temperature. And then what I'll do is I'll add a cup or 2 of water out of my tank into the bag, which will start to acclimatise them to my water conditions. If the conditions are wildly different, for example, I've taken them from pH 4 and I'm putting them into pH 7.5, it might take 24 hours or more for me to acclimatise them to that water before I let them out. Generally, however, if there's not a great difference in the pH, then half an hour, put in a couple of cupfuls of water, another half an hour, and you can let them out. If you want to be really sure, you can wait that extra 30 minutes, put a second cupful of water in, wait 30 minutes and then let them out. But generally, if you've taken care to make sure that they're kept in the same temperature of water you kept them in, you keep that water cool in a styrofoam box, or you can use an esky, anything insulated that's going to keep them cool. And then make sure that they're adapted slowly to your tank. When I say slowly, at whatever speed is necessary for the change in water conditions from where you've kept them to the water conditions you have in your aquarium at home. Another technique that you can use is a styrofoam box with a gar bag or gar bags. These are really heavy duty gar bags. They're garden bags rather than gar bags. Basically one of those will go into the styrofoam box. You put 10 or 15 litres worth of water into that, so the water will come about halfway up the bag, halfway up the box. Put the fish in that you wish to take home. Tie off the bag. Put a rubber band around it, put the lid back on, and you can head off home. Obviously, if you're only collecting a couple of fish, then this is overkill. If you're collecting several types of fish from the one location, you may need a box. As I said, this is a heavy-duty garden bag. You can also use the black plastic gar bags for the wheelie bins. If you're using those, they're a lot thinner, so I generally recommend using 2 bags, as I did with the plastic bags. Once you get them home though, it's a little more difficult to acclimatise them. If you've got them in one of these sort of bags, these bags you can actually lift out of the box with 10 litres of water in and they won't break. And you could, if you wish, put them into your aquarium, make sure that it doesn't overflow when you do that. And you can temperature acclimatise them the same way as you would a small bag. However, if you're using the black gar bags, the really thin ones, you try and lift those and you'll end up with fish all over the floor of your fish room or your house. So there's a couple of different ways you can deal with that. The first one is get a small bucket or a large cup and start adding water every 20 minutes or so. Add some water to your bag until the box and the bag are full. So if you've only filled it halfway, what you're doing is you're diluting that water with your water to bring it up to the top of the box. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to drip acclimatise them, and that is to set up an air hose or something that will deliver a slow stream of water into the bag until again the water level has been brought from whatever you transported them in up to the top of the box or the top of the bag. Just need to keep an eye on it because it's quite easy to forget about it for half an hour, come back and find that it's overflowed and you've got water everywhere, or maybe even some fish have escaped. But they're the 2 main ways that you can temperature acclimatise them and water condition acclimatise them to your tank. Key things to remember for the conditions of the fish are A, make sure you collect water that's clean before you start fishing. Make sure the water that you collect is going to be similar to the temperature of the water that you're catching the fish out of. So again, if you're catching them out from the deep, don't collect your water from the edge where it's hot. I prefer to add a little bit of salt to help them with osmotic shock, and also a bit of stress coat to help them get their slime coat back. Once you bag them up, make sure you put them in an insulated container as quickly as possible. Again, temperature control is critical. So an esky or a styrofoam box, make sure that's in the shade. If you're putting it in the car, leave all the windows open, cover it with a towel. Getting them home, make sure that you don't introduce them too quickly to your tank, depending on how different your water conditions are from the water conditions you got them out of. So firstly, temperature acclimatise them. That will take about 30 to 40 minutes. But after that, you need to acclimatise them to the water conditions, particularly if they're very different from what you caught them in. Good luck and happy fish catching.